Every city holds a place that everyone knows but no one talks about. In mine, it's a funeral home without a sign, tucked away on a corner of old brick that escapes the hurried glance. Opaque facade, frosted glass, two tall windows where white curtains never move. Those who pass by know, those who need it find it. Those who don't need it learn to divert to another block. They call it, whispering, the old funeral home, as if old were an era, not a direction. I didn't work there. I'm the director of another establishment, clean, audited, with spreadsheets that match flowers, but through a chain of favors and untimely deaths, I was called to cross the street that the world prefers not to cross. It was 10 minutes past midnight. It had rained in the afternoon and the asphalt was still breathing cold. The door opened with the ease of doors that don't close from the inside. No doorbell, no warning. There was no reception. The hallway was already a decision. The air, a mix of the cool stillness of a cold chamber with the clean fabric of another decade, demanded I slow my pace. No photos, no marks, no flower vases pretending to be hope. To the left, an empty display that once held candles. To the right, a clock that always read 2:17, as if it were a personal protest. The floor was made of wood that knew the name of every step. It creaked a little, but it creaked as if recognizing. I moved ahead. The preparation room had a tall window with glass that didn't open. The counter lacked the polished clinical shine of modern funeral homes. The steel tables, not polished for selfies but to endure. Everything in its place, and nothing like my place. I didn't come looking for them. I came to collect the body of a man whom his family, for reasons of neighborhood and accounting, preferred to hand over to my establishment at dawn. "They handle what no one else wants, Director," the daughter said on the phone, half gratitude, half confession. "But Dad wanted to leave through the door he came in as a boy," she added, and the phrase made more sense when I saw, at the end of the hallway, a narrow door that wouldn't fit a modern casket without apologizing. That's when the sounds began. Not the ones that scare, but the ones that explain. A refrigeration motor started its cycle with an old hum, deeper, reminding me that machines age better than we do. A steel drawer slid without a jerk, a gesture of experienced hands. A faucet dripped 3 times and decided to die. And a voice, which didn't come from a throat but from habit, said, "Bring the bigger cloth," so clearly that my body didn't need imagination. It was a house with memory. And memory, in a place like that, speaks in the language of work. I lifted the first sheet. I weighed the scale of silence that every director carries. What should I touch? What should I leave? What should I record and what should I forget? The label on the man's ankle, beautiful handwriting, cursive they no longer teach, only said the first name and the neighborhood. No guide number attached with plastic, no QR code, a cloth ribbon with a simple knot. Before, I thought. And before answered me with dignity. I called for someone. Not, "Is anyone there?" There was, there always is. "Good evening," I said, and the house, like houses that know how to listen, cleared its throat. The wood adjusted a millimeter on the doorframe. The curtains moved without wind. The old hinges stood up. There was a time when wakes happened here. The rooms still remembered prayers from people who are no longer here. The hallway returned words reluctantly, as if it had learned not to spread gossip. I needed the stretcher. I needed the handles. I needed the kind of help bureaucracy ignores. A hand on the clasp when a finger is missing. The hand came, not that it touched. It came as a presence that tilted the air in the right direction. I fitted the bag with the technique my father taught me without calling it technique. Shoulder at height, obedient knee, fist that respects the metal. I weighed the man not by weight, but by what the family had asked me to take with him. The neighborhood, the boyhood door, the thank you no one writes. When I arranged the sheet, I found in the coat pocket a folded note. No flowers inside. I smiled. Here, even refusals are polite. As I crossed the hallway with the stretcher, I heard what they would say tomorrow, what I imagined. Prayers at kitchen volume, a spoon tapping the edge of a metal pot, and it was just the drawer returning to place. a broom sweeping without hurry, and it was just the wind learning the baseboard. A chair pulled to a better spot, and it was the footsteps on the wood returning me. No one tried to scare me. No one needed to. That funeral home didn't want to be a story. It wanted to be crossed with respect. And I, who lived telling what the buildings tell me, decided, as I passed through the narrow door with the stretcher, that this time I would tell less. But I would tell. The funeral home that no one talks about is not a secret because of haunting. It's a secret because of decency. It doesn't post obituaries. It doesn't produce celebrations of life with slideshows. It doesn't hire a soprano to hide the silence. It attends to what others prefer not to. The indigents with arms tattooed with names no one shows up to pronounce. The elderly who died without papers and with neighbors who bring coins in a bread bag. The workers at dawn whom the city prefers to call cases. It's a place that only works when it doesn't make a profit. That's why no one talks. And maybe that's why I need to speak, without betraying. I returned the next day before dawn to sign the release. There was no receptionist. There was a large book, hardcover, thick pages, where hands with different handwriting had written years of stories in lines that the law does not recognize. Mr. Benicchio, shoemaker, 3 children, paid for the daughter, 1989. Mrs. Maria, washed clothes in the river, neighbors did a fundraiser, 1996. Baby, baptized on Saturday, still smelling of soap, 2004. I read less than I wanted, and enough to understand that this wasn't a register, it was a refuge. The before was not confused, it was an ethic. A woman appeared like people who have learned to enter without asking for a door. She wore a smell of dust and lavender water on her apron, a plastic hairpin in her hair that could have been another color if it weren't always Tuesday. "You are the director of the other house," she said without questioning. I nodded respectfully. The profession has eyes. She looked at the stretcher and noticed the care with which I folded the sheet at the edges, concealing the metal with a cloth that doesn't belong to the dead. It belongs to the living who come to see. "Will he go through the boy's door?" she asked, as if it were a liturgy the building requires. "He will," I answered. She smiled without teeth, and it was the most dignified thing the room returned to me. No one rushed me. No one hurried my time. And in the silent pause between a signature and the closing of the stretcher, the house gave me a gift I didn't deserve. The sound of a spoon tapping against a pan handle came from the kitchen in the back. I went there, expecting water and fire, and found only the objects ready. 2 old pans shining from use, a clean stove, a folded cloth, a thermos with a label that said, "For the family." It wasn't for me. It was for those who would need it in half an hour. I took 2 cups, served bad but honest coffee, and carried them to the hallway, where a man I didn't see enter was holding his hat with both hands. "Thank you," he said, as if I had done something. I was merely the messenger of the before. I grew impatient for a second with the world's inefficiency. No one answers the phone, but everyone shows up when the house calls. There was no phone ringing, but there were messages the walls kept. "Oil the gate. Ask for coffins from Lucho. Don't forget the baptism of Lourdes' baby." Who could I call? The town hall? The supplier? A friend? The house, without technology, had everything figured out. A widow came in with a brown envelope full of small bills, gave it to the woman in the apron, who recited the amounts and returned change along with a blue ribbon. No one counted out loud. No one asked for documents. I signed the release with the awareness of someone who's in the way. As I helped carry the stretcher to the narrow door, I noticed something I couldn't leave behind. The handles of the coffins on the shelf had fingerprints, marks of those who carry, not those who sell. The difference is in the nails. Those who carry have dirty nails where the wood bites. I looked at my hands as the director of a tidy establishment and felt ashamed for a moment of the manicure. I scraped an edge of metal and gave myself a reminder. "Don't polish more than you pull." It's the kind of phrase my father would have liked to hear. In the back courtyard, where no customer enters, the washed clothes dried on honest lines, held by clothespins that don't map Instagram. The wind, undecided, tried to find the scent that would make this my favorite place in the neighborhood. I found a piece of black ribbon fallen next to a box, one of those shoe boxes, with scraps of ribbon. Picking that up felt like a small gesture, and therefore indispensable. I placed the ribbon in the box and the box under the table. That's how we begin not to interfere, by keeping what the other hands will need. Before I left, I returned to the book. At the bottom of the page, they left a blank space, perhaps for one more name that would come in the afternoon. I didn't write anything. Not because I was afraid of placing myself there, but out of respect for the fact that that book wasn't my story. In the darkened mirror on the wall, I saw that I look exhausted when I'm with myself, not with others. And for the first time, I envied the funeral home that no one talks about. There, exhaustion is not a click, it's fertilizer. I could have left the old funeral home behind me, like an episode of an on-call shift, but cities collect moral debts. I paid mine on Saturdays. I would bring boxes of leftover gloves, metal drills the supplier got wrong, a stainless steel tray my establishment swapped for a modern one. They never asked. I left them. And when I left, something was returned to me without a signature. A new cloth folded at the door of my house, a bottle of strong coffee in a brown bag, a label with my handwriting copied in the book of the other house when I needed help in a hurry. Ethics has these exchanges. It was on one of these Saturdays that the tension organized itself like a liturgy. I arrived with a batch of battery-powered candles, ugly and useful, and found a family in the hallway of the funeral home no one talks about. They didn't come through my establishment. They came for what the before knows how to do. "You need to go today," said the woman in the apron. And the sentence was not an order. It was salvation. The lady wanted to go on Tuesday because the godmother worked on Monday, but the body sometimes has its own Monday. They, what the neighborhood has of resilience and codependence, brought cut flowers from the garden, a rosary smelling of drawers, and a bread bag with coins. There was no budget. There was the right impulse. The small room had 4 chairs and 2 benches. In the corner, a table that served as an altar when there was no altar. The body, cleaned with care and not in haste, rested with the dignity that doesn't ask for expense. Hands aligned, collar that doesn't scratch, mouth closed without violence. I rolled up a cuff, a gesture I make when I'm about to do, and the woman in the apron, with the authority of someone who doesn't err, shook her head in a no. I understood. Here, you come to be, not to do. I sat, with the respect the room required before asking. It was at that moment that I understood why no one talks, because talking can break the pact. Neighbors arrive unannounced and leave without photos. The hymns, when they exist, come from the rasping throats of those who swept the yard. The plastic cup on the table doesn't fall because no one bumps into it. Mourning has already learned the way in that house. And when the time comes, no one announces it. People look at each other as if saying, now. They stand up, 2 hands adjust the sheet. Another 2 support the weight. They pull the narrow door without drama, and when the street discovers there was a procession, it's because the procession has already become conversation at the bus stop. In the yard, the children glance over to see if the dead person looks like anyone from school. That only happens in places that aren't myths. They asked me to lend the key to my house to open the car that had broken down. I lent it. The body left as if going to the bakery, with a neighbor beside with 2 bad jokes with an "wait the shoe" said by an aunt. The old funeral home doesn't humiliate for glamour, it humbles for normality. And it was that normality which, that afternoon, returned to me the tension I had forgotten. My job across the street runs the risk of being too beautiful. I returned to the frosted glass hallway days later, for another reason. An indigent found under the bridge without a name and with a tattoo of a saint no one recognized. No good funeral home wanted to sign. I signed because sometimes the one who directs is the one who writes the name that's missing. The funeral home no one talks about lent me a coarse cloth shroud, one of those that embraces helplessness with honesty. "We won't put flowers," said the woman in the apron. He didn't want them. And in that he that the woman used for someone she didn't know, there was a community greater than any eulogy. The following week, a note appeared tied to the gate of my house, folded and weighed down by a small stone. "If you need Tuesday, we'll go," from the other house. Signed only Maria do Avental. And a phone number that was probably the payphone at the market. I smiled. My Tuesdays are for Excel. Hers are for thread. and I would need the thread before the Excel. The turning point came on a rainy dawn when both houses needed each other at the same time. Mine stalled with a power failure that shut down half the rooms and drove half the compressors crazy. Theirs took in water through the skylight they hadn't yet had time to seal with zinc. I had a generator. They had a roof that didn't give in. I had extra trays. They had cloth still drying. On the phone, which works when the world doesn't decide to disconnect, just 2 sentences: "Come and I'm coming." I arrived soaked from the city. Their hallway smelled of squeezed cloth. The preparation room, happy not to be a stage, welcomed me with the light of a battery-powered candle and a hand that knew its own darkness. "Pull this table here, director of the tidy house," said the woman in the apron, not asking, commanding in the way that saves and doesn't hurt. I pulled. Her family of 3 looked at the 2 young men we were, me and the assistant, as if we were the only obstacle between them and an irreversible mistake. I didn't err. They didn't thank me, and the gratitude held back saved the minute. The skylight dripped enough for a bucket. I, who had already won a foolish trophy for speed in a trade magazine, understood that speed is sometimes an offense. "Slow down," I said, repeating my father. "Slow down," the roof repeated. The body, at its time, accepted being washed with water that wasn't from my calibrated faucets. The shroud I had borrowed last week now came back double, 2 new cloths that the woman in the apron sewed with thick thread, the very Tuesday she had promised me. "For when you're in a hurry," she said, handing me the remedy for my illness. That's when I heard what I couldn't reproduce without disrespect, a song that wasn't a hymn, sung by the 2 children in the family with that thin voice of those who learned the lyrics by ear. "Go with God, Mr. Z. We still have bread. Tomorrow there's a market." The woman in the apron closed with the sentence no school teaches, but every decent funeral home writes at the footer of the day. Now he's ready. I found myself trying to cry, not for the scene but for relief, and remembered that my father taught me to save this for the street. The turning point doesn't end in tears. It ends in the agreement. "If you need a generator, call me," I said. "If you need a roof," she replied. We laughed, because the puns that save the world aren't worth a prize. We agreed I would bring an electrician on Monday. She agreed to put the thickest sheet under the Friday cloths, because 2 will come at once. There was no prophecy there. There was an agenda. Before I left, the hallway returned that sound of a spoon tapping a pan. "Coffee?" I offered, not knowing if I was offending. "Tuesday coffee," she replied, her apron tied tighter, and I understood that Tuesday had become a common noun in that house, an adjective for what's done when you can't wait. In the morning, I returned with the electrician and a box of bad cookies. The electrician looked at the ceiling with the disdain of tile professionals. "This'll hold up sure," he decreed. "If it weren't old, it would have fallen by now." The woman in the apron thanked me with a new cloth. I left with a new rule in my pocket. Never offer a solution when the house asks for company and cloth. Solutions we give later. Cloth we give now. And that's how the 2 houses, the one with a name and the one no one talks about, signed a pact of utility. The day came when my house, clean and audited, couldn't handle a before that only the other house knew. An elderly lady from the old neighborhood demanded with irrevocable sweetness to leave through the boy's door. My door doesn't fit a boy. It fits protocol. I called the payphone number from the market asking for a line on Tuesday. "Come," answered the nameless voice. We went. Family, me, cloth, shroud, and bad coffee. The room of the funeral home no one talks about already had the bench in the right place when we arrived. The chairs, 2. The sheet, the one that covers metal without hiding honesty. The hands, the ones that didn't raise any diplomas, but know that you don't drag a shroud on the ground. The climax was silence. The lady passed through the narrow door with the pride that only narrow doors grant. The neighborhood outside returned the ritual. Children stopped playing. The fruit seller lowered his boxes. The bus slowed down, not out of respect, but out of reflex. The world knows more than it admits. At the cemetery, the other house mixed with mine. Antunes, the watchman, exchanged a wave with the woman in the apron. They know each other without calling. The tomb was opened with the correct sound, without spilling earth where it shouldn't. The priest didn't show up, and sometimes that saves us, because the neighbor reads the name that matters better. Dona Aurea, he said, and the wind adopted the Dona as if it were also a neighbor. The lid closed at the right time, not out of haste, but with the wisdom of a steady arm. Someone told me on the way back a secret I will know how to keep. The funeral home of before has a tin safe with notes, not money. Notes of promises paid, 3 loaves of bread, a bouquet of chrysanthemums on Mother's Day, a gate painted at Christmas. The city pays like this when it has no spreadsheet. I, a mediocre accountant of what matters, set out to make a spreadsheet of favors and then tear it up. This kind of accounting only works without numbers. The following week, the woman in the apron knocked on my door early. I brought what you forgot. It was the black ribbon I had picked up from the ground weeks ago. You still need to tie it over there. She pointed to my house. I understood. There was a family needing before on this side of the street. There was a ribbon, a shroud, and bad coffee to prepare. I didn't need to ask her to stay. She came in, and for the first time my house seemed less beautiful and more useful. Climax isn't fireworks. It's the click of the narrow door behaving in the wide house. It's the fingerprint on the shiny handle with no one apologizing. It's my manicure giving way to the wood. It's my Excel accepting a line called Tuesday. It's the woman in the apron sitting beside me and saying, as if closing a narrative without needing a bow, "Now he's ready." And I responding with the only adjective that doesn't offend, the right way. No one talks about this funeral home because speaking incorrectly ruins it. Speaking correctly requires having been there, carried, swept, served bad coffee, and put the ribbon in its place. Since I crossed that door, I've changed 3 things that no one would notice from afar, and that's why they matter. 1. I created a place in my house without a sign, a portable before. A small room that doesn't go on tours, where the sheet covers metal and the shroud weighs more than the flower. 2. I adopted the pronoun he for those without a name, not to romanticize, but to prevent the neutral from devouring the human. 3. Now I ask, before any spreadsheet, which door do you want to exit through? If you ask me who runs the funeral home no one talks about, I'll answer honestly, a woman in an apron and a neighborhood. And when I'm not there, she will be. And when she's not there, Tuesday will be. The rest is gossip from a hurried city. The house exists because the city needs places that don't profit and therefore don't humiliate. They exist because we still have neighbors who recognize the weight that a handle makes on a nail. Maybe your city also has a place that everyone knows and no one talks about. Maybe it's not a funeral home. Maybe it's a church kitchen, a community hall, a basement that shelters coats. If you ever enter, enter with your shoulders behind you, with no appetite for history. If there's a hardcover book, don't write. If there's bad coffee, drink it. If there's a narrow door, thank it. And if there's ribbon on the floor, pick it up and put it in the box. I keep going on Saturdays. I bring gloves, leave cloth, swap thread, learn Tuesday. Sometimes I cross paths with the woman in the apron on the street. She always carries a bag that I never see empty. Sometimes it's bread. Sometimes it's a shroud. Sometimes it's nothing. And still, it weighs as if it were the whole city. We greet each other with the kind of sentence the night understands. If you need. And the rest stays in the honest subtext of those who know a lot, speak little, and do what's necessary. Now it's your turn. Does your city have a place that exists from before? If one day your house can't handle a before that only the other side of the street knows, will you call or try to solve it with flowers? Comment the keyword Tuesday and say, what small discreet gesture without photos made a difference in a farewell you've experienced?